Hello guys and welcome back. So for today's video I'm going to start kicking it off basically reviewing my reading goals that I set myself for 2020 and just giving you some statistics of basically how I met the goals, how those goals went. So for 2020 I set myself I think about 9 reading goals. I will link the video down below and up in the cards as well. So for some of the videos I'm just going to roll like 3 of the reading goals into one, just simply because actually I don't have much to talk about for like each of the individual ones. But for this science fiction one I thought I would just do an individual one. I don't have much to say on this one either, but I thought I would just do an individual one and sort of compare this to the video that I did also last year about my science fiction reading. If you don't know, last year was like the first year that really I decided to start reading science fiction, and I had a really good reading year in terms of science fiction. This year, not so much. So I have written down some statistics and stuff, and I will just share them with you now before I start talking about those books. So far this year, I have read 85 books. That is 10 books up from the amount of books I read last year. So last year I read 75 books. Of those 85 books, 7/6 of those books are science fiction books. The reason why I say 7/6 is because one of them is a compilation of 4 books. But going off of my Goodreads stats, it would obviously count the 4 individual books as just one book. So really it is 7, which means 8% of my reading is made up of science fiction books, which is just so low. Like, this is kind of what I think I would have expected myself to do last year, and last year I like surpassed this goal by so many. So last year I read, like I said, I read 75 books, and 18 of those books were science fiction books. So it actually accounted for 24% of my overall reading. So, you know, we've got 8%, we've got 24%. In my video last year, at the time that I did it, I'd started early in December, so I hadn't finished reading all the books for the year. So I think actually in that video, I said science fiction accounted for 28%, but obviously as the number of books I read increased, that percentage went down. So basically what that means is my science fiction reading is down by 16%. So obviously if you look at it, we've got actually, so the previous year, so what, we're in 2020, 2019, 2018. So yeah, I think in 2018 I read 1 science fiction book, so that put me at 2%. Last year I read 18, that put me at 24%, and this year I have read 7, so that puts me at 8%. The 7 books is what is making this figure 8%. So yes, I am down 16% in my science fiction reading. So I thought I would just pull out some stats about some of the books, just because I was just looking at them thinking, this is interesting. So 6 of the 7 books I read were actually written by women. This was not done intentionally, but I'm very happy to see this. Obviously you'll find out what like those books are in a minute. Only 1 of the books I read was part of a series, and I haven't even read the second bit in the series. Like, I'm terrible for books in series, but last year I managed to read 3 trilogies. Okay, granted 1 was like a series of novellas, so there was a trilogy of novellas, and actually I didn't finish off the last one. But other than that, I managed to seriously read 3 trilogies from science fiction, and 2 of them like really enjoyed. As they got to the end of the trilogy, they were boring AF for the first 2 books in the trilogies, the first books in each of the trilogy. Amazing. So yes, only 1 was a series. 2 books I happened to read this year were novellas, and one of those books I listened to as an audiobook. Out of the 7 books, 3 of those were written by a black woman, so that is the OG herself, Octavia Butler. And funnily enough, this is because Goodreads provides this statistic. The shortest and longest book I've read all year fall into the science fiction category. Now, it's a little bit of a cheat because the Octavia E. Butler book, like I said, contains 4 books, so obviously this page count is really long, but the shortest book that I've read is from Octavia E. Butler, which is one of her novellas, and the longest is obviously the compilation book it's put there. So that's great. And then, so the final thing I wanted to say about these books, I'll dive into all the individual ratings, is my average rating for these books, basically the science fiction books that I read, was 2.8 stars. Which, yeah, that's kind of low, I'm not going to lie. And that actually falls below my overall Goodreads average, which is an average rating of 3.2 stars. Funnily enough, also in 2019, 3.2 stars was my average rating. I feel like I'm always like, I give books really high ratings, but no, I give books a 3, which is a middle of the road, which is just like, this is okay. But whatever. So yeah, now let's just talk about the books that I read. And yeah, I mean, some of these have probably been spoken about in wrap-ups, others probably not. So yeah, let's look into them and see. I'll just give you my thoughts. So the first book to talk about is Semiosis by Sue Burke. This is the book that is part of a duology. So there is the second part on my Kindle. My boyfriend actually read this earlier this year, and that's why I sort of picked this up. And then like he read the second one as well. This book is a book that I would just definitely describe as one. It is science fiction for sure, but it's very much focused on like flowers and nature and yes, semiosis and how things take form. I will read you the back because I read this so long ago and I do remember what it's about. The one thing I remember is there's basically like a talking plant who I think they've named Steveland. And I found this book okay. I didn't like it so much and that's why I haven't gone on to read the second book. Like, I haven't rushed to read it. I will read the second one, but like my boyfriend said, it's not as good, so then that obviously puts me off actually going to read it when I just found that this was okay. So this book says here, escaping conflict on Earth, an idealistic group of settlers arrive on a distant planet Pax with plans for an ideal society. The world they discover is rich with life, but this is not the Eden they were hoping for. The plants on Pax are smart enough to domesticate and even slaughter its many extraordinary animals. To survive, the colonists realize they must strike bargains of their own. But if they are to make Pax their home, they must go further, searching for a way to communicate and coexist with these utterly alien intelligences. So yeah, there's different animals on here, there's different plants on here, but I think overall, as it seems to be with societies or groups or civilizations, that someone comes out on top and is able to sort of manipulate or encourage or influence the other plants to sort of and bend them to their will, essentially. And this book is quite interesting in the sense that obviously you've got that aspect of the one sort of dominant plant and, you know, how they discover like what to do with the different plants and stuff, but you've also got the sort of I was going to say fable, but it's not a fable, but like tales of an older group that existed before and sort of searching for that group and looking at the previous work that they have done and sort of wondering why they're no longer around. So there's also that bit of aspect there of a little bit of a mystery, but also wondering how the previous civilization got so far ahead. So it was that. I mean, I just found the book okay. I thought it was alright. It's actually funny, maybe it was last year when I spoke about Dark Eden, someone did comment telling me to read this book, and it just completely slipped my mind. But then when my boyfriend picked it up, I was like, the title looks really familiar. So whoever it was, I've now read it. I gave this book 3 stars, by the way. Like I said, it was just okay. The next book I'm going to speak about is Blue Ticket by Sophie Mackintosh. I gave this book 2 stars. I felt so bad because I have already spoken about this book, so I won't talk about it too much. I will just give you a very brief overview because I did another video where I spoke about this book and I feel bad because I did slate it and it's got like quite a number of views and I'm like, But this book is basically focused on a main character, Carla, and she lives in a, so this is sort of set in a dystopian society. She lives in a society in which women and, well, young girls really are basically told, I think at the age of 15 or 16, they're told sort of what their life is going to be like, essentially, whether or not they're going to go on and have babies or whether or not they're going to be like child free and do other things with their life. And this comes in the form of a ticket. So I can't remember which way around it is. If it's a white ticket, you get a baby. If it's a blue ticket, you get a baby. But obviously the book is called Blue Ticket, so I feel like if it's a white ticket, you get a baby. And so it's not a spoiler when I say to you that our main character gets a blue ticket. Like, it says it in the blurb of the book. And like it says, like, she goes on the run, basically. She falls pregnant. So all these women that don't get a white ticket are just sort of able to like embark on careers and stuff and sort of have sex, and everyone's sort of given a form of contraception. It sounds like it's the implant. There was a horrible scene in this book talking about that. What I say the implant, the coil, perhaps, maybe that's more accurate, because I think the implant's the one you get in your arm. But yeah, she goes on until she's pregnant, and again, it tells you in the back of the book this. And the story is basically about her on the run and a bunch of other sort of women in the wild on the run, and just what it's like in this society, running away, that sort of element of people catching up with you. Yeah, the book had issues for me, and I say it in that video. The book had a lot of issues with it simply because you're never really told how society came to be like this. You're just told this is the society. And I think it's just a bit too simple that the person who gets a blue ticket wants a white ticket and therefore has baby. There must be thousands of stories like this. I don't really understand like why, I guess, Carla's story, Calla, I think her name is actually, story was just like done that way. I would have preferred a bit more complexity to the novel, if I'm honest with you. But yes, I will direct you to that video and I'll link that down below in the cards. So the next book I read is Machineries of Joy by Ray Bradbury. I think Ray Bradbury is a very well established sci-fi writer. I also think his writing is a bit like weird and wonderful. And I really wanted to read Fahrenheit 451. I don't know, Fahrenheit 45. I don't really know what it's called, but it's a book about burning books. And my boyfriend's dad lent me this because they're both like really huge sci-fi read it. So he said read this, like, so you can get a sort of taste for his writing. And yeah, this book just contains a number of short stories which are just like really weird. I would describe them as trippy, if I'm honest. I feel like this is the kind of book that if you took like acid, these are the kinds of things that you would see and things would happen. It is so weird. Like even the front cover is like mushrooms and like just a weird desert land and things like that. I gave this 2 stars. I found some of the stories okay. I found some of the stories like quite clever, and I found some of the stories just weird, and I was a bit over it. But my overall consensus of the short story collection was definitely weird and wonderful, but I feel like so much of it was weird that it was just a bit repetitive for me, if I'm honest. But it was a nice introduction to his writing. And you know, when I see like people do short story collections and have like obviously novels published and stuff like that, I know this is the life of a writer, you know, that people write so many things, but I'm always astounded by how many ideas people have. And I just thought that this really backed it up for me. Like I was really like impressed with the range of his ideas, even if some of them were just completely wacky. Another book that I read was To Be Taught With Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This was a novella, and I listened to this as an audiobook. And I will read just a bit of the blurb, because it says here, in her new novella, Becky Chambers imagines a future in which, instead of terraforming planets to sustain human life, explorers of the solar system instead transform themselves. And essentially what this book is about, and it's told from the perspective of one character named Ariadne, and 3 other explorers, and it's about the different planets that they explore and sort of how they sort of adapt to their time there. But really and they do like take the time to explain like what happens in the different planets and sort of some events there. But really I also felt like it was a lot to do with the personal relations of each of the groups, like how they related to each other, and just like kind of how fluid they were in terms of their sexuality. I didn't get as much exploration or description of, you know, them sort of adapting themselves to meet the sort of different needs of the planet. We very much hear when there's like, you know, horrible things happening, but I really don't feel like it is definitely what the blurb says it is. But a little bit of the blurb says here, Ariadne may awaken to find that the support for space exploration back home has waned, or that her country of birth no longer exists, or that a cult has arisen around their cosmic findings, only to dissolve once more by the next waking. But the moods of Earth have little bearing on the mission to explore, to study, and to send their learnings home. And yeah, that's essentially what they do. They explore new places, send their learnings home, and, you know, like it says there, occasionally they may find that like the group that sent them out there actually no longer exists. Like it just seems that every single time they come out of a different planet, something has shifted dramatically on Earth. And that's sort of basically the main bulk of the novel. And this book is told in the form of a really long letter, so it's actually Ariadne writing home to someone. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars because, like I said, I just didn't really feel it was what it said on the tin. I definitely wanted a lot more information about the different planets, but then again, this is a novella, so it was quite short, and maybe there wasn't just, you know, the time or the space to sort of bulk that up and make that, I don't know, a fully fledged novel, obviously, because it's a novella. But yeah, that was another book that I read. So the book that I'm going to talk about, which is my sort of 6/7, is this one, Octavia E. Butler's Seed to Harvest. It contains the novels Wild Seed, Mind of My Mind, Clay's Ark, and Pattern Master. So in the video that I did last year, I spoke about Wild Seed and Mind of My Mind because I read those 2 last year, and then I decided to read these 2 this year. Honestly, I am so surprised by how much I loved Clay's Ark and also Pattern Master. I think, like, so I gave this in total 5 out of 5 stars because all the books in here, like, while Mind of My Mind blew me away, it's by far my favourite book from her. Like, I just completely love it. I think Pattern Master was actually released before Mind of My Mind, so I know that my boyfriend really enjoys Pattern Master, and I do enjoy Pattern Master, and I think had I not read Mind of My Mind first, I would have really, Pattern Master would have been my favourite. But the things explored in Mind of My Mind but I think I did go deeper into that in the video that I did last year. So Clay's Ark and Pattern Master. Clay's Ark is actually a book that I really enjoyed, and I'm really surprised that I did, because it's actually essentially about sort of like zombies in a way. I don't know what the other sort of term for them would be. So I will just read the blurb because I think it's a lot easier, and I did read this like about 6 months ago. Like, I remember the basic premise, but a summary would be much better for you guys. So it says here, an innocent family carjacked on a desolate highway is abducted to a bizarre new world, a world being born in the Californian desert. They discover Earth has been invaded by alien microorganisms. The deadly entity attacks like a virus, but survivors of the disease genetically bond with it, developing amazing powers, near immortality, unnatural desires, and a need to spread the contagion and create a secret colony of the transformed. Now the meaning of survival changes, for the babies born in the colony are clearly, undeniably not human. So yeah, I think I said, well, maybe I did speak about this in a video earlier this year, but I said that this was sort of like a Contagion novel. But yeah, essentially what Clay's arc is, I think she wrote this after maybe she wrote Pattern Master and things like that, because the sort of Clay arcs do appear in there. And I think this is sort of like a prequel essentially to Pattern Master, so that you understand who the Clays are, because in Pattern Master they're sort of like fighting against them, and you understand who they are and the sort of disease that they have caught and how they came to be. So I think that's why this book was created. But yeah, essentially it talks about the fact that they carjack this family, and it's about like how the disease mutates in the family and sort of how the family fights back. It's very graphic, there's some very graphic scenes in here, but I actually thought this book was really well paced in terms of its action scenes. I find like one of the things that I find really confusing about TV when I'm watching like action films, everything moves so fast, and I get it, it's the nature of action, like, you know, people are having fights, like it's not slow motion, but it moves so fast that you're not able to actually fully comprehend what is happening. But I thought Butler did a really great way of just really showing the scene and pacing things out. And yeah, there was like backstory with the family and how like sort of their family came to be, and yeah, I felt really sorry for the family in the end. They each had to overgo their own trials and tribulations while dealing with this sort of new group of people who've taken them against their will, and you know, the different characters in there react in a different way. I really enjoyed it for a story that was about that, because usually things like that I'm like, I'm not here for it. Like, I don't really care for that, but thoroughly enjoyed it. And then for Pattern Master, absolutely loved it. Pattern Master essentially takes, you know, everything that what I read in the first 3 novels, and it sort of comes to a head. Pattern Master is completely different in the sense that, you know, it's about 2 brothers essentially and the sort of fight for power, but what the rest of the other novels have done has really built the world, so you know how everything works. There's a lot of reference to how the world sort of works, and I think without having the other 3 novels I would have really struggled with Pattern Master, but I didn't. I really enjoyed sort of seeing this these brothers battle out for this power and how sort of they overcame it. But because I had the knowledge of how sort of their world works, it was really interesting for me, to be honest. And to be honest, their story is completely different. Like, again, I will read you the blurb. Like I said, it is about 2 brothers, but this will explain a bit more. It says, the combined mind force of a telepathic race, patternist thoughts can destroy, heal, rule. For the strongest mind commands the entire pattern and all within. Now the son of the Pattern Master craves the ultimate power. He has murdered or enslaved every threat to his ambition except one. In the wild, mutant-infested hills, a young apprentice must be hunted down and destroyed because he is the tyrant's equal and the Pattern Master's other son. So yeah, it's essentially about a battle for power and how they overcome it. And I just think the way that they use the telepathy is amazing. Like, it's, for me, I find things like that, I struggle to really, I guess, read books about that, because I'm just like, I don't believe that can happen. But this really showed like the tug for power, and just sort of the manipulation that occurs, even with things like telepathy. Like, you would think someone else really knows what's happening because they have this power, but you know, the more you sort of manipulate other people, the more like other people feel the need to betray you, and if you're nasty to them, they feel the need to betray you. So you might know how to read people's minds, but you don't always know what's going to happen. And yes, I completely love that series. So I think I have another book by Octavia E. Butler to read. I just haven't got around to it, but I am going to be going through like all of her books next year. So the final book is also by Octavia E. Butler, and that is a novella, and that is called Bloodchild. I gave this 3 stars. If I'm really honest, I didn't really understand what this book was about much closer to the end. The beginning of it, I found it very confusing. I wasn't really sure. It was only once we got to the end that I understood sort of the world we were living in. Again, I will summarize this by reading the blurb, because there's no way I could explain this, but it says here, years ago, a group known as the Terrans left Earth in search of life free of persecution. Now they live alongside the Tillik, an alien race who face extinction. Their only chance of survival is to plant their larvae inside the bodies of humans. When Gan, a young boy, is chosen as the carrier of Tillik eggs, he faces an impossible dilemma. Can he really help the species he has grown up with, even if it means sacrificing his own life? And then the rest is whatever. So yeah, I very much didn't realise what was happening very much until the end. A lot of it is talking about like being chosen and like this sort of weird spider sounding thing coming to visit a family's home, and sort of family drama, people being annoyed. Like, there was all of that thrown in with the sort of element of this sort of being chosen and loving, laying eggs and stuff like that. So it was a little bit confusing, but towards the end, like the sort of resolution and the choices the character made, I liked that aspect. That's why I gave it 3 stars, but it's definitely one that I need to revisit. So I think basically what to close with is to talk about what I'm going to do next year. So I mentioned in a previous video that actually I don't really have any reading goals for next year, and I know that I won't be having any specific goals around science fiction. what I'm basically going to do is I still have a bunch of recommendations that was made to me by a very lovely subscriber, and I still need to go through those books. But I also, the reason why I ended up reading To Be Taught If Fortunate was because I wanted to read Becky Chambers' sort of trilogy. Now, I don't know if either of these books are actually the first one in the trilogy. I feel like it's not, so I don't know where the actual first one is, but that's why I picked up that book. So I am definitely going to go ahead next year and read these, even if I didn't feel like I enjoyed that book as much. Like, it was about a completely different thing. I mean, they're all still sci-fi novels. And I'm definitely going to pick up more of Octavia E. Butler's books. But yeah, I'm not going to set any specific goals around science fiction next year. I'm just going to try and go through sort of the recommendations that I had. Definitely read books from Octavia E. Butler and the Becky Chambers trilogy, and I think like leave it at that. And then after that, I think actually I can take it upon myself to find other science fiction books that I might like, and of course I watch a bunch of YouTubers as well who read science fiction, so I'll be able to sort of pick up any other recommendations from them that I might like. But yeah, that is all for today's video. So I hope you enjoyed sort of hearing about the science fiction reads that I read this year. I know it hasn't been a lot, but I guess that's just the way it happened. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will have other videos talking about all of my reading goals, and if you want to know what my reading goals are, please do check out my 2020 reading goals video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in another one. Bye.